we'll talk about an idiot. He coaches at Boise State. He says freshmen shouldn't receive NIL money. Dabo Swinney quietly says, you're absolutely right. They don't deserve anything. Dabo Swinney publicly says, thank God nobody's talking about me and my stupidity with NIL. Wow. No NIL for freshmen. How do you recruit when you say that?
I mean, I guess the only thing you could possibly say is that Boise State doesn't recruit anyway, but doesn't recruit well anyway. But this is, for the record, Spencer Danielson is our age, the new Boise State head coach. He's been at Boise State since 2017 as an assistant in different ways. He went to college at San Diego for a year. I think he Jim Harbaugh would have already been at Stanford at that point. Then went to Azusa Pacific, was a linebacker, and got promoted to head coach in 2023. This is beyond mind-boggling that he would say this, particularly when he's only been with the team. He was the interim coach last year and finished 3-1, and then became the head coach this year. And your first thing as full-time head coach, one of your first acts is to say freshmen won't get NIL money. That is beyond ridiculous. And here's why I think it's insane.
I'm going to give you the ultimate reason why it's insane in a second, but go ahead with this reason.
Well, one of the things I had said for a while that NIL would do is I actually made the argument that it would bring more parity to college football, not less, because college football before then was totally based on the conference and the recruiting fertile ground you are. And the more factors you have in college football, the more parity you have. And I thought NIL was going to allow smaller schools to not build like a national championship team, but to allow for maybe 2 or 3 players to say, hey, why don't you want to stay home and play for your hometown? We can cobble up some money and get you to stay. I can just say, being from Memphis, I think that could be a worry for Tennessee, because the Amari Thomases in the future, maybe the Tigers go to the Amari Thomases and say, hey, you want to make a lot of money and stay home and play for Memphis and represent and play with a few other high school teammates and, all your family and friends in the stadium. And FedEx could write enough checks to keep 2 or 3 guys that would otherwise go to Tennessee. Boise State would be on that level. This absolutely nukes that idea, though, for them.
Okay. All that you said is true. And he should be very worried about what he said, but for a different reason. Are you ready?
Yep.
It's illegal. You can't say that. The NCAA has already lost the lawsuit on multiple occasions. It's illegal. They could literally, based off that comment, open an investigation against him. This is how much has changed. It's not going back. It's illegal.
Well, here's why it wouldn't be. And this is why it'd be a little tricky. The reason it was illegal for the NCAA was because they ran all of college football. So it was an antitrust lawsuit.
Polluted, so to speak, yes.
Boise State, if Boise State's not going to do this, they can't file an antitrust suit against Boise State because Boise State would be like, well, they can go play for somewhere else. We're not making them come play for us. So that's why it wouldn't be as illegal. Now, I want to come out. Spencer Danielson has officially clarified his comments. And he said, we're not putting a strict...
Will you agree with me to say that the mindset is illegal? Or
Yes. It is I hate to say this, but for a certain contingency of people, it almost brings back, these kids are on scholarship and things like that, but doesn't it almost bring back like a Confederate, almost slave philosophy of no, these players belong to us and they should play for us almost, you know what I mean?
Well, Lord, that's been there for the last 125 years. Where you been? This is the most minor example I could think of that, but it's one of about a million.
Yeah. So Spencer Danielson, the head coach, he now says that, okay, there won't be a strict embargo, but we're not going to allow anybody to promise or offer NIL deals to recruits. That is your pipeline that is how, as a smaller school or as a non-Power 5 school, that's how you build a team that can maybe compete with the Power 5 program every now and then. You convince a few kids that are on the recruiting trail, hey, want to come play for this school where you'll be beloved and we can offer you just enough NIL money? Boise State. Okay, now I say Boise State. Idaho is not like, okay, a Louisville, Cincinnati, or Memphis, or a place like that that's a smaller school, but is in a more fertile recruiting ground. Nobody's in Idaho. Who's the last recruit to come out of Idaho that you ever heard about, Dave? I don't think it exists. But at the same time, I do think they could maybe couldn't Boise State go into California, get a few elite kids and say, hey, you want to come play on some blue turf, be beloved in a small town, and here's some extra bucks. And also you could promise them this. You're choosing between USC and Boise State. Your NIL money is going to go a lot further in Boise than it is in USC, isn't it?
Yeah, beautiful town too. Beautiful. That's one of the probably 5 places I would live. I would choose to live there. It's gorgeous. It's funny to me, and I see it as C Scout guy, and we're going to mention this right now. It's funny to me how some people are on one end of the spectrum and others are on the other end of the spectrum. So apparently, if you can help me look this up, there has been a law passed in South Carolina with NIL that it approves updated NIL bill to allow more cooperation between schools and athletes. So good job, South Carolina. You did good for your football team. Tennessee, do the same thing. Whoever the legislators are, let's go ahead and do the same thing, because that's what Missouri did and Eli Drinkwitz did when they landed the 5-star, seems like his name was Ngawa, maybe, defensive lineman instead of Tennessee. It was because Eli Drinkwitz was able to be in on those negotiations. Now that appears to be the case at South Carolina. Doesn't that just seem normal? Like if you were going to buy your wife a car, which not to be 1950-ish, but a lot of time guys go take, they handle the car buying. Wouldn't you at least take your wife to see what they thought about the car? I mean, right now, the NIL has to depend on a phone call. But what if the kid says, listen, I need $100,000 more, and I'm taking a call from Kirby Smart, and I'm sick of this, and I want to make my decision. Then why in the world isn't Josh Heupel allowed to be in that room?
I totally agree. He should be. He should be. And by the way, now here's where it gets dicey. At that point, and this is why Title IX has to be updated. Again, this is the problem with the letter of the law with Congress is a law's on the books until it's repealed or reformed. And I mean, that's the way it should be, to be fair. But antitrust law came into place in 1890. Title IX came into place in 1972. Do you think Congress ever thought these two things would ever conflict with each other? Title IX and antitrust laws. Do you think they ever thought that would conflict?
Well, no. Nobody ever dreamed that college football or the NFL would pass at the time horse racing, prize boxing, and baseball as the most popular sports.
That is very true. That is so very true. Prize fighting killed itself. You know that with boxing and the promoters and the things they did.
I'll give them credit though; they hung on for a long time.
They did, well, the promoters and the boxers are still making even more money now.
That's right.
But where I'm going at is there can be a Title IX lawsuit if a coach or a member of a football program is involved in NIL transactions, because then they could say you're using university resources for things that benefit football players that don't benefit softball players. Now, the response to that is, I'm sorry, guys, I'm just going to say it. I've seen the facilities at Tennessee, Dave. I've seen the facilities at other schools. The idea that before NIL, the idea that football players weren't getting more than softball players was laughable. Like, you saw, they both had an athletic scholarship, but football players had much better food selection and usually stayed in much better dorms, didn't they?
Yes. I applied to stay in the Gibb dorm, and I did not get in there. Only about 10% were non-athletes. You couldn't call it a football facility at the time. You couldn't call it an athlete's dorm, but that's essentially what it was.
Exactly. And so, but remember, they put up the facade that the football players and the softball players are getting the same stuff. They're not getting the same stuff, though, are they? The football players and the softball players are not getting the same things at all. And that's where...
Better be careful with the facilities usage. I think there's probably somebody overlooking, hey, the football team's taking up the indoor practice facility but now they have 2. I mean, they got so much space. They're good. Everybody can practice at the same damn time. Everybody just run out there and hold one big practice.